Hello, and welcome back to the whiteboard video series with Professor Klein. And so here we are today, we're going to discuss elasticity, right? And so if you think of elastic, you often think of a rubber band and how much that moves. And we will use that as a way to think about elasticity throughout today's topic. So elasticity is measuring, it's a way to measure the responsiveness of quantity demanded to a change in price. So what we're seeing is if price goes up 10%, what's going to happen to the quantity demanded, right? Now, from the law of demand, you should recall that as price increases, quantity demanded falls, and vice versa. As price falls, quantity demanded increases, right? And so with elasticity, we're actually going to have four measures eventually. We're going to start with the one that's most useful. And the one that's most useful is the price elasticity of demand. So this is the one that is referred to more often than not. And so when we talk about elasticity as a measure of the responsiveness of quantity demanded to a change in price, that is the definition for the price elasticity of demand. We're going to tweak this definition as we talk about the three other measures to get to four. The second one that we will talk about is the price elasticity of supply. And so as you might expect, the price elasticity of supply, what's going to change? We're going to change the responsiveness of quantity supplied to a change in price. The third one, we're going to look at cross price elasticity. Why is it called cross price elasticity? Because we are looking at the price of one item and the change in the quantity demanded to another item. So it's the same idea, but all we would add here is to the change in the price of a related good, right? And so that's what would change there. The fourth one is going to be income elasticity. And so the definition would change to be the measure the responsiveness of quantity demanded to a change in income, right? So as the title of these change, we're going to change just ever so slightly this definition, right? So as we begin by thinking about the price elasticity of demand, right? As price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. As price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. One of the things that's going to happen, I'm going to just abbreviate this, price elasticity of demand. If we think about this as a percentage, right? So we're going to do the percentage change in quantity demanded over a percentage change in price. Now, probably the number one problem that happens is that people flip this. We tend to think about price more often, so we tend to think about putting price in the numerator first, right? But actually, here's the way that I think about this, and I paused ever so briefly to think about this. Denominations in the denominator. What's a denomination? Well, the different bills that we have are different denominations of bills. So a $10 bill, a $20 bill, those are different denominations. So denominations in the denominator. So price, that's going to be the same for 1, 2, and 3. For income elasticity, it's going to change to income, but it's going to be the same format. So this is if we have a percentage change. And it's easiest to really understand this as we think about percents first, and then we can use things that aren't percents. So what we're asking here is if we observed that when price increased by 10%, right? Law of demand tells us that we should expect quantity demanded to decrease. Well, if it decreased by 5%, it didn't decrease by as much as our price went up. And so as we plug this in, we would plug in 5% and 10%, and we can actually just drop the percents, right? And we would get 0.5. when we're looking at price elasticity of demand, anything less than 1, so a price elasticity less than 1 is called inelastic, right? Or thinking about this another way, coming back to our definition, the quantity demanded is not very responsive to a change in price. The quantity demanded is inelastic. It does not change very much when the price changes, right? And so that's why if it's less than 1, it's inelastic. If it's equal to 1, well, in our example, that would have been if price increased by 10%, quantity would have decreased by 10%. That would be 1. For every 1% that price went up, quantity demanded went down the same amount. That's going to be equal to 1. That's going to be unit elastic. Meaning for every unit it changes, right? For every unit price changes, quantity demanded changes by the same amount. So it's unit elastic. And then finally, the last possible outcome here is that if it's greater than 1, it is elastic. So for example, if this was not quantity demanded decreased by 10%, if instead it was 20%, well, now when we plug that in, right, put the quantity in the numerator, 20% divided by 10%, that's 2. And so it's saying that every time the price increased by 1, quantity decreased by double the amount. And that's the other way that we can use this. It's double the amount, or before when we had it half, it decreased by half the amount, right? That's giving us our multiplier here of when price changes, how much more will quantity demanded decrease by. So if it's greater than 1, it's very elastic. It's very responsive to a change in the price. Now, why does this matter? It really matters when we get to the idea of we want to maximize profit, which in this class we're going to discuss primarily in Unit 2, right, when we get to Chapter 8. So I'm going to introduce here for just a moment what is profit. How do we calculate profit? So calculating profit, if you only have one item that you sell, if you sell t-shirts and that's all you sell, and by the way, in economics, we use the abbreviation PI for profit. And I'll talk about that more when we get to Unit 2. If we only have 2 things that we sell, and actually I want to do total revenue, not profit. If we only have 2 things that we sell, total revenue is the price that we sold our t-shirts for times the number of t-shirts we sold, right? If I'm selling t-shirts for $10 a piece and I sold 40 t-shirts, right, then I made $400 in revenue. And so this is not profit, because profit would then subtract what were my costs associated with producing these, right? So when we look at total revenue, we've got price and we've got quantity, which are both the things that we're including in our elasticity measure, right? And so calculating total revenue, here's what we're going to find. I'm going to skip to the point. If we have an inelastic product, and the price goes up, well, since quantity demanded, we know it's going to fall, law of demand, but it's going to fall by less than our price goes up. And so here's what's going to happen. As a result, total revenue increases. And since we're not talking about costs, if costs have remained unchanged, then if our total revenue increases, our profit increases, as long as our costs are the same. All right, so that's for an inelastic product. What about for an elastic product? For an elastic product, if the price goes up, quantity demanded falls by a larger amount. And so therefore, total revenue falls. And again, ceteris paribus, right? Assuming everything is the same, if our total revenue falls, assuming costs are unchanged, our profit will fall. So we definitely want to know, particularly from the perspective of the producer, are we selling an inelastic product? If we're selling an inelastic product, let's increase the price. If we're selling an elastic product, we actually might do better to decrease our price, right? Because it's also going to follow that if we decrease our price, we can actually raise revenue. Now, the other thing that happens is elasticity is affected by different factors. One being how much of your budget it takes up. We'll do that during a lecture. But because it is dependent upon outside factors, your product doesn't stay inelastic forever. It doesn't stay elastic forever, right? It's going to move, and actually you'll see in this week's homework, it can move on the same demand curve. There's going to be an area of this that is inelastic and an area of this that is elastic, right? So we can't just continue to, well, if I just drop my price forever, I'm going to increase my revenue, right? At one point, that becomes patently false. Because if I'm selling my t-shirts for $1 and I decide to make them free, obviously my total revenue is no longer going to go up. And that's what we tend to find. We tend to find that the further you get to lower prices, the more inelastic it becomes. And the higher your prices, the more elastic it becomes. And so again, one of the things that happens is number of substitutes, right? And so if it's something that's really expensive, then people might try to get very inventive in what they would substitute for your product. If it's really cheap, nobody's going to look for a substitute, right? And so all of these things have an impact. And so therefore, elasticity is not set in stone. It changes. And so that's why we continue to calculate elasticity, and therefore why it's very important to understand that calculation. All right. So in other videos, I will go over some of these others. I hope that helps you get a sense of what is elasticity and why does it matter, particularly the price elasticity of demand. Have a good one.